My name is Mark. I'm a cartographer, a map maker, but my real passion is exploring the wild places most people never see. I'd planned a solo expedition into a remote, unmapped section of the Sierra Nevada, far from any park, untouched by modern life. My goal: chart a hidden tributary and spend a week completely off the grid. I had the best gear, cross-reference maps, and every precaution in place. The drive-in was long and lonely, civilization fading with every mile. When I finally stepped out at the trailhead, the silence was absolute. No houses, no power lines, just ancient pines and the unknown. This was where my map ended and my journey began. I felt a thrill. This was the challenge I'd been craving. I told friends my route and left my GPS coordinates, but the wilderness had always felt like a sanctuary, not a threat. I had no idea what was waiting for me beyond the edge of the map. The first day was perfect. Cold, clean air, a faint trail, and the satisfaction of navigating by compass and instinct. My pack was heavy but manageable, my mind clear and focused. I'd prepared obsessively: satellite phone, locator beacon, first aid kit, and knowledge of every local animal. My plan was simple: reach a meadow by the river in 2 days, then map the tributary. The risks seemed predictable: injury, weather, maybe a bear. But the wilderness doesn't care about plans. As dusk fell, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful hush of evening, but a heavy, expectant silence. The world felt like it was holding its breath. I brushed it off, but unease crept in. I didn't realize it was the first warning. The next morning the silence was even deeper. No birds, no rustling, just the sound of my own footsteps. I tried to rationalize it, but the quiet felt oppressive, unnatural. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping echoing through the trees. Not a woodpecker, too steady, too deliberate. The tapping would fade, then return, always just out of sight. I pressed on, nerves fraying, the forest's beauty turning menacing. Shadows deepened, and every sound made me jump. I was trained to read the land, but nothing made sense. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was predatory. I realized I was being watched. By midday, the trail itself began to change, leading into thickets, dead-ending at cliffs, reappearing impossibly on the other side. It felt like the land was shifting, subtly working against me. My map and compass said I was on course, but the ground told a different story. At a creek I found tracks, humanoid but wrong. Too narrow, stride too long. The prints entered the water and vanished. I searched, but they didn't reappear on the far bank. Fear replaced curiosity. The puzzle pieces were coming together in a way I didn't want. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, a constant pressure. I was no longer an explorer, I was an intruder. The wilderness was closing in. As dusk fell, I noticed strange structures, geometric arrangements of sticks and pine cones hidden just off the trail. Some were simple, others complex, always placed where I'd barely noticed them. Dozens lined my path, forming a corridor. I took a photo of one, a pyramid of white sticks topped with a raven feather. It was both primitive and intelligent, a warning or a claim. Dread settled in. I was not alone. I found a small clearing and set up camp, abandoning my original plan. The silence returned, deeper and more menacing than before. I clutched my satellite phone, knowing sleep wouldn't come. Night was falling, and I was certain something was out there, watching. I slept in short, fitful bursts, every sound outside my tent setting my nerves on edge. The oppressive silence of the forest pressed in, broken only by the wind and distant creaks. I prayed for dawn. When it came, a thick, cold fog clung to the ground, turning the world into a gray mystery. As I packed up, a faint, metallic clinking echoed through the mist. I followed the sound to a clearing. There, on a flat stone, sat a bright orange backpack. modern, upright, and completely out of place. The fog swirled around it. The clearing was empty, but something felt profoundly wrong. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, but the abandoned backpack raised too many questions. Was someone in trouble? I called out, my voice swallowed by the fog. Silence answered. Hesitantly, I stepped into the clearing. The backpack was clean, high-end, and recently placed. Inside, I found a wallet, David Miller, and a crude map marking this very spot. Then I saw it, a tent hidden under pine trees. Relief hit, then dread. Was David inside, needing help? I zipped the pack and walked toward the tent, bracing myself for what I might find. As I got closer to the tent, the sense of wrongness intensified. The tent was zipped shut, but the rainfly was staked out unevenly, as if it had been put up in a great hurry or by someone who didn't know what they were doing. There was no sign of a campfire, no scattered gear, no footprint impressions in the damp soil around the entrance, which was odd. It was as if the tent had been dropped there from above. I called out again, my voice now laced with an urgency I couldn't hide. David Miller, are you in there? I'm here to help. The silence from within the tent was as profound as the silence of the forest around it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I reached out a trembling hand and grabbed the zipper tab. It was cold and wet from the fog. I pulled it down slowly, the sound deafeningly loud in the quiet clearing. I peered inside, expecting to see a sleeping bag, a person, anything. The tent was empty. Not just empty of a person, but completely, utterly bare. There was no sleeping pad, no stray gear, no clutter at all. The floor of the tent was pristine, as if it had just been taken out of its packaging. It was just an empty shell, a hollow space that should have contained a life, a story. I backed away from the tent, a cold, sickening realization dawning on me. This was a stage. The backpack, the shovel, the tent, it was all a setup. A deliberate scene constructed for me, the sole audience member, but why? Was it a prank, a threat, or something far worse? My mind flashed back to the strange stick structures, the impossible tracks that vanished into the creek. They were all connected, all part of a narrative I was being forced into. This wasn't a fellow hiker's campsite, it was a trap, a lure designed to draw me in, to hold my attention. And then I understood. The true vanishing wasn't about the person, David Miller, who I now suspected might not even exist. The vanishing was about my own safety, my own sense of reality. While I was focused on this bizarre scene, this decoy camp, I had left my own pack, my lifeline, my only means of survival, unattended, on the other side of the clearing. A sudden, gut-wrenching panic seized me. I turned and sprinted back through the fog, praying that my gear would still be there, that this elaborate, terrifying game hadn't yet reached its conclusion. The forest remained silent, watching me run. My panicked sprint back through the fog felt like moving through a nightmare. The ground seemed to pull at my feet, and the thick gray air muffled the sound of my own ragged breaths, creating a sense of surreal detachment. Every shadow in the swirling mist looked like a figure, a silent observer watching my frantic retreat. The clearing where I had left my pack was only 100 yards away, yet it felt like miles. My mind was a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. The carefully constructed scene of the second camp was a distraction, a piece of theater designed to pull me away from my own supplies, my only connection to survival and the outside world. I burst back into the small clearing where I'd started, my eyes immediately locking onto the spot where I had left my pack. It was gone. The rock I had propped it against was bare. For a moment I simply stood there, disbelief warring with a rising tide of pure, unadulterated terror. It couldn't be gone. I scanned the area desperately, thinking maybe I had misremembered the exact spot, but the indentation in the soft earth was still there. My gear, my food, my water filter, my map, my shelter, my satellite phone, everything was gone. It had been taken with silent, impossible efficiency in the few minutes I was gone. A feeling of absolute violation washed over me. This was not a random act, it was calculated. Something had watched me, waited for me to take the bait of the decoy campsite, and then it had moved in. It had stolen my survival gear, but it felt like more than that. It felt like it had stolen my future, leaving me stranded and exposed with terrifying precision. I shouted into the fog, a wordless roar of anger and fear. The sound was swallowed instantly by the mist, leaving only a profound, mocking silence in its wake. There was no response. There was never a response. I was now truly lost, not just geographically, but in a way that felt deeper and more fundamental. My meticulous preparation, my expertise, my confidence, it had all been stripped away in a single masterful stroke. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the small pocket knife I always carried. The fog began to thin slightly, not enough to see clearly, but enough to reveal the oppressive, unending sea of trees that surrounded me on all sides. The wilderness was no longer a neutral force. It had an intelligence, a malevolent will, and it had just made its move. The game had changed, and I was no longer the player. I was the piece being moved. Panic is a cold fire. It consumes your reason and leaves only the instinct to run. I ran, branches whipping my face, roots grabbing at my ankles, fleeing into the dense woods. I collapsed at the base of a massive cedar, lungs burning. Dusk settled, fog cleared, and a full hunter's moon rose, casting sharp shadows. The world became a stark landscape of silver light and darkness. I felt exposed, shivering in the cold. I found a shallow cave for shelter. Then, I heard it. The rhythmic tapping, close and circling, never what I expected. I was being hunted by something unseen, patient and terrifying. The night stretched on for what felt like an eternity, a long, drawn-out symphony of terror. The tapping kept going, continuing its slow, deliberate patrol around my position, a constant, nerve-shredding reminder that something was out there in the dark. I stayed huddled in my shallow cave, my muscles cramped, my body trembling uncontrollably from the cold and the ceaseless adrenaline. Sleep, honestly, was an impossible luxury. Every single time my exhausted mind started to drift, some sudden noise would jolt me back to full, heart-pounding awareness. I was, like a mouse in a maze, and the owner of the maze was enjoying the show, refusing to let me rest. Sometime after midnight, a new sound began, and man, it was far more horrifying than anything that had come before. It started as a low hum, a vibration I felt in my chest more than I actually heard with my ears. It seemed to be coming from the ground beneath me, from deep within the rock I was pressed against. The hum grew steadily in volume and pitch, transforming into this strange, guttural chattering. It was a wet, clicking sound, interspersed with what sounded like these distorted, guttural whispers. It wasn't the sound of any known animal. It was organic, yeah, but utterly alien. The sound was so close, seemingly emanating from the very rock that was supposed to be my shelter. I pressed my ear against the cold stone wall of the overhang, and the chattering was clearer, more detailed. It sounded like a frantic, inhuman language, a series of clicks, pops, and deep, throaty growls. The rock itself seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the noise. The horrifying implication settled upon me. Whatever was making that sound was inside the rock formation. The ground beneath me wasn't solid. I was hiding on the roof of its den. The hunter wasn't just circling me, it was directly below me. A wave of nausea and primal fear, unlike anything I have ever experienced, washed over me. I scrambled out of the overhang, stumbling into the cold, moonlit open. The sound was fainter out here, but I could still feel the vibration through the soles of my boots. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the dark opening of the shallow cave, expecting some nightmare creature to, emerge from the shadows. Nothing appeared, but the guttural, chattering whispers from below continued, a secret and terrible conversation happening just feet beneath the forest floor. I was no longer just lost in the wilderness. The chattering from below drove me into the open, trading the illusion of shelter for the terror of the moonlit woods. I crept away, every step careful, haunted by guttural whispers beneath my feet. I crouched in dense ferns, shivering from cold and fear, mind reduced to pure survival. The moon's cold light revealed only shadows. When the first gray light of dawn broke, hope flickered. I was still lost, but I had survived. With trembling legs, I chose a path downhill, toward water, toward civilization. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all I had. My movement was a clumsy shuffle at first, my body protesting every step. Thirst was a burning coal in my throat, and hunger was a dull, persistent ache in my stomach. But the adrenaline of fear was a powerful fuel. I pushed through the undergrowth, my eyes constantly scanning, my ears straining for any sound. The forest was waking up, but not in a normal way. There were no bird calls, no squirrels chattering. The unnatural silence persisted, a sign that the watcher, the hunter, was still nearby. Its presence was a constant weight, a feeling of being perpetually in someone's sights. The game of the previous day was over. This was now a direct, relentless pursuit. As I descended, the terrain grew thicker, more difficult to navigate, and then I started seeing them again. The stick structures. They were everywhere now, more numerous and more complex than before. They lined my path, forming a clear, unmistakable corridor. Triangles, pyramids, and strange, ladder-like constructions were propped against trees laid across my path, forcing me to step over them. It was no longer a subtle warning, it was a declaration. I was being herded, funneled in a specific direction. The path of least resistance was the path it wanted me to take, and I had no choice but to follow it. The realization was terrifying. I was not escaping. I was being guided. Every step I took was according to its plan. I tried to deviate, to push through the thick brush to the side of the strange corridor, but the woods were impossibly dense, a wall of thorns and tangled branches that tore at my clothes and skin. The path marked by the stick figures was the only clear way forward. My desperate gamble to find water was leading me exactly where my pursuer wanted me to go. The feeling of helplessness was absolute. I was a puppet, and an unseen hand was pulling my strings, leading me toward a final, unknown destination. The structures themselves became more unsettling. Some incorporated stones, arranged in spirals. Others had feathers, like the one I had photographed. But now there were different kinds, not just raven feathers, but the brightly colored plumes of a blue jay and the soft, downy feathers of an owl. It felt like a collection, a display of trophies. Was this what it did? Did it collect things from the forest? Was I to be its next acquisition? I broke into a stumbling run, my mind screaming, pushing my exhausted body past its limits. I had to get out of this gallery of horrors, this pathway that was leading me deeper into the heart of the nightmare. I ran blindly, stumbling and falling, desperate to escape the corridor of sticks. Suddenly I heard the sound of moving water. Hope surged through me. Downhill had led to a river, wide, fast, and beautiful. On the far bank the forest looked less menacing. I knew I had to cross. The water was icy and swift, but I waded in, fighting the current. I barely made it, collapsing on the opposite shore, shivering and exhausted. Then I saw it, a new stick structure on the riverbank. A final message. It had let me go. Dragging myself from the riverbank was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My body was battered and freezing, but fear pushed me onward. The forest on this side felt different, alive with birds and insects, the silence finally broken. After hours of stumbling, I found an old logging road, a sign of humanity. Reaching the paved road, I collapsed in relief. A logging truck driver found me, gave me water and food, and drove me to safety. At the clinic, I tried to explain what happened, but to them I was just another lost hiker. They found my truck at the trailhead, untouched. No sign of David Miller, no strange campsite, just silence. The official report said I was exhausted, disoriented, and imagined the rest. I never went back to being a cartographer. Maps became warnings, not invitations. Now I live in the city, comforted by noise, haunted by memories. I saw behind a curtain I was never meant to see. Sometimes I dream of the corridor of sticks leading me deeper into darkness. All I know is that there are places where we are not welcome.